Hi, I'm Marty Grizzanti, and this is the Marty Grizzanti Show. As a full-time real estate investor and business owner, I have a real fascination of finding the key principles for business success and personal development. This show is a reflection of my personal mission to find out what truly makes somebody successful in business and in life. We will find tools and tactics that they've used to reach those levels. If you're the type of person that is not satisfied with average and you have a hunger for learning that will never cease, this show is for you. Welcome to the show. I like to really, there's so many podcasts where it's like, and welcome to the show. We got a great guest. Now, Johnathan, tell me exactly where you came from, how real estate started for you, which is fine. That's fine. But you just said something that I like to have conversations, and I like to do this, Johnathan. This is my show. Just like you have a show. This is my show. So I get to ask the questions I want to hear. I don't want to ask questions that I just know that maybe a random person may want to know about. Yes, we're going to talk about who you are and where you are and all that, but I like to do it organically, not just. So you said before off camera, you're in Brooklyn. So just people know, because it's also very nice to talk to a fellow investor in New York.
Yes,
a lot of people get the heck out of here. And you're just, as we were talking off camera, you were talking about investing in a hotel in Penn Yan, which I love Penn Yan, huge fan of the Finger Lakes. I'm sure you are. Did you get drawn to that, or did you know about the Finger Lakes? Did you go there a few times? Because
okay.
So
I'll tell you how it all started. So the hotel is actually in Watkins Glen. We have a house in Penn Yan.
That's it. So, Watkins Glen, still Finger Lakes. Big fan of Watkins Glen too.
So yeah, the way this came about, starting going to the Finger Lakes, actually, it's been a long love affair for me. My best friend from college is a college professor, and his first college teaching job was at Hobart and William Smith in Geneva.
Yes.
And so when it was like my first year practicing law, and I took a trip. I took like my first vacation after I started working was like, I basically went to Boston to see my brother. I went to Vermont to see my aunts. And then I was like, hey, I'm going to go visit John at Hobart, because I've never been out there. And even though it was like almost exactly like this time of year. So kind of like the foliage was gone, and like it was all just sort of gray and, northern New York winter weather, but it was still, but I fell in love with it. I was fascinated, like this whole idea of like, I'm there looking over Seneca Lake, and John's like, that lake is 600 feet deep. I'm like, what? That's crazy. So I started just getting into it. And then I just started going back regularly. And then after I got married, I took my wife up there, and then we just started going every summer, and kind of became like the place that our kids knew, as the summertime destination. And I'd been after my wife to like buy a house up there for years, and she was like, I don't want a second house, it's too much work, blah, 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 blah. And then so finally though, when COVID hit, when we went up to the Finger Lakes for our annual summer trip during COVID, and it was like the first time that we'd been like sprung from our apartment, for any long period of time, and we could be outside and everything. My wife's like, we're buying a house. I was like, yeah, finally. So we bought the house. And then once we bought the house, it was just about 2 years ago. We started for us to get from New York City to Penn Yan. One of the quickest routes is to go right through Watkins Glen. And so we would drive through Watkins Glen, and after you leave Watkins Glen, start heading up the hill overlooking Seneca Lake. And like basically the first time that you can really see the lake at the crest of the hill, there's this old motel there, and it has this just incredible commanding view of the lake, right? It's called the Glen Motor Inn. And I would drive by this place and go, man, like it's such a shame that this old kind of beat up old motel is in this spectacular location. Like somebody ought to fix that place up. And I'm not a hotel investor, right? But originally, although it's changing, I'm getting into it now. But I was just online looking for some smaller assets. I was thinking like, I'd like to buy something in New York. I'd like to do something in the Finger Lakes, like have some business up there so I could be there more often. And I started looking for like small multifamilies that maybe I could just buy, or maybe just get a couple of friends together, like not do a whole syndication, just like find some smaller stuff.
Mm.
And while I was doing that, I came across the hotel for sale, and it had been on sale for a year, and they had just cut the price and cut the price and cut the price. And I was like, all right, maybe I should look into this. Right. So I, not knowing anything about hotels, I went and found somebody who knew something about hotels and started digging into it. And he was like, yeah, I know, I think this is interesting. And that guy had and this was just coincidental because it was kind of like a business partner of mine. I asked like, hey, do you know anybody who's into, does hotels? And he's like, as a matter of fact, my wife's cousin and, has a hotel management company. And as it turns out, they had done a bunch of rehabs already on similar kinds of assets, like old 1950s hotels that were smaller, that they went and like totally rehabbed and sold. So he's sort of like the ideal person to ask about this. So I got him to underwrite the deal for me. And then I just went to like a couple of investors, like guys that I know who can write big checks and who I made a lot of money for before. And I said, hey, are you interested in this? And they were like, yeah. So we actually did the deal for all cash, and all the renovations all cash. And we're in the middle of renovating now. So we took it over in June. We ran it for the rest of the season. We just shut down like a week ago, and I guess maybe at the end of October. We shut down at the end of October, and now we're just like heavy into renovations. So it's really fun. I really
love
like
that
this project. Yeah,
I love that, and that's it. It's almost like because this is almost like a driving for dollars situation.
kind of. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know it was for sale, and I didn't go and like knock on the door and say, hey, would you sell it? But it was when I saw that it was for sale. And then also, I mean, I'm just like, I can't pass up a bargain. I'm like one of those people. So I like when I saw that it was not only was it on sale, but it had been on sale for a year and they kept on cutting the price. And clearly that just said to me that like there was an opportunity there to get it at a reasonable price, because it needed a lot of work. And I think that's what was turning people off, was just that it needed a lot of work. And I mean, we can talk more about my theories about this hotel space.
I want to hear about hotel space, because I was just at a meetup. I'm a part of Commercial Academy, and that's what everyone's talking about is hotels. So I'm all in. Go ahead.
Yeah. So no, I'm not talking about hotel conversions. That's something that I do want to get into. And I've been kind of like nibbling around the edges of that with a few, close friends who are experts at that. But so everybody always asks me, oh, you're doing a hotel conversion. No, I mean, we're renovating this as a hotel. But I have just looking at, and this is still fairly limited, right? Because I've only been in this business for 6 months. But the opportunity that I see here is this. There are a lot of these small hotels that are owned by baby boomers and even people who are older than baby boomers. And their kids don't want the hotels. The kids have like moved off someplace else. They moved to the big city, they moved to wherever, or they're just not interested in running the hotel.
Yes.
Or maybe they are, but they don't have the funds to do all the CapEx that's needed on the hotels. Right. And so these assets, there are a lot of them for sale, and there's really like very limited exit for a lot of these owners. Right. Because if you think about, all right, these hotels are generally not appropriate to put a flag on, like a chain, right? They don't meet the brand standards for chains. They're often too small. The rooms are too small. They're too old, right? To get them up to those brand standards would just involve like more CapEx than it's worthwhile putting into them. So you're not going to sell it to like an operator like that. Who are you going to sell it to? Well, basically you're going to sell it to like another mom and pop operator. But how many of those are there out there? And how many, you can think of like, okay, my wife is an example. Like my wife, like her dream is to run like a B&B, like a little inn, like 5 rooms, 6 rooms, that kind of thing. But we're talking like a 40-room hotel. That's like a whole different proposition. Like it's one thing for you to like retire from your corporate job and like to make a little bit of income for part of the year in retirement or semi-retirement, to like run an inn in a place that you love to be. Like that's one thing. running a 40 room or a 60 room or a 100 room hotel, that is a full-time business, right? And
Full time.
and that takes a kind of like, if you mess up, you really mess up.
Right.
And if you and it's just like, it's a lot of work, and it's also, it requires expertise. And most people who just like have a corporate job and want to run like a B&B don't have that expertise.
No doubt.
So that shrinks the pool of people even further who want to own these assets. So there's a really big opportunity here in my mind for people who have the ability to raise capital and bring in professionalized management who can run these things remotely, right? Because they know how to run assets remotely. They don't have to be there on site, right? Which is already what I do with multifamily, right? I mean, I buy the asset, I find a management company, they run the thing day to day. I'm overseeing them from a high level. I'm dealing with the investors. You could do the same thing with these hotels, right? But you have to have you have to be able to understand how to put together this kind of structure. And on top of it, in the hotel space, right, there are a lot of people who have that skill set, but a lot of them don't want to be bothered with these smaller hotels, right? They've got their formula, right? If you think about, like, you know, there are families out there that I know who own like dozens or hundreds of hotels, but for them, it's like a cookie cutter thing. Like, they have a formula. The formula is like, you know, limited service, branded hotel on a highway, you know, at the interchange, like whatever. And they can just rinse and repeat that over and over and over and over again. They don't want to do like a small tourist hotel in a remote location, you know, that operates for 6 or 9 months out of the year.
That's a good point.
Like all that kind of stuff. So what you're talking about is a limited number of people who can buy these assets. Now, of course, on the flip side, that means like exiting, obviously you're running into the same problem.
Sure.
That may turn some people off. But, you know, what we're thinking about is actually building a brand here of, you know, buying a lot of these assets. And then ultimately the exit is like, it's big enough that you can sell to a bigger investment group. You've already put together like a portfolio. It's not just like a one-off asset here. You're essentially selling them a whole company. So we're trying to work through now how exactly you structure that, because it's a little bit different with a hotel than like a multifamily asset, because you have an operating business. You know, multifamily asset, you just have an LLC, you run things through the LLC, boom, you're done. Like with a hotel, you have to divide the ownership into like the ownership of the asset, and then there's the ownership of the hotel for liability reasons. So you have 2 LLCs. Then you've got to figure out, like, you know, payments between them. You want to make sure that you really run the LLCs separately, so there's no veil piercing, you know, problem. You know, so it's like it's a little bit more complicated, but not that it can't be overcome. So
yeah, and I love that you're like, yeah, I've been in this for 6 months, and it's like, and you're like, yeah, but I took the action and I bought the thing because it made sense, and you were able to figure it out. And is that kind of your philosophy with a lot of this stuff? I mean, yes, you want to be educated, but gosh, you can only educate yourself so much until you got to just start getting after it and doing it.
You know, it's really funny that you mentioned that, because I hadn't really thought of that, but that actually has been my philosophy. And it was something that I always would talk about in the multifamily space. Like when I coach people who are trying to get into it, you know, like I would say, for instance, like you can go and watch like the 75 or 80 videos that I put together on like how you do a multifamily deal, right? And that's great. Like it'll get you a lot of the way there.
Yes.
But you're never really going to learn until you actually do something.
Right.
Like start putting in offers and see how that feels, and see what happens when you put in offers, and then actually like buy something, right? And then see all the issues that come up with having bought a property, and now figuring out how do you solve those problems. Like the learning, you can learn a lot through a course, and it's great preparation. I would suggest that people do that before just jumping in. But
Agreed.
Like, you're never going to learn as much as you will by actually like being in the trenches and doing it.
I agree 100%. I think you got to go, like you just said it, like getting in I think the habit or the routine of making an offer. I know people, Jonathan, and it's so sad. They'll spend all this money year after year for events and conferences and masterminds. And you'll ask them, well, how many LOIs have you made this year or this quarter? And they'll be like, well, I made one this year. One LOI. And I
Yeah.
go, that doesn't cost you anything to make offers. And so I think there's like this thing where people go, well, they're never going to accept this offer. And I'm like, good. You don't, I mean, I'm trying to get this across to people that I'm in a few partnerships right now. It's like, they go, well, the numbers don't work. I go, well, what's the number that does work?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. What's the number that does work for us? I go, I'm a sales guy. I need to complete the cycle. If I'm having a conversation with somebody and I say I want to make an offer to them, I don't care if it's absolutely atrocious and it's going to offend them. I need to complete the cycle. Are you on the same page with that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can't tell you like how many, it hasn't happened to me personally, but I can't tell you how many people have told me that, they put in the offer at what they wanted. They didn't get the deal. And then the deal came back to them at the price that they wanted it. Right.
Absolutely.
So it's that the whole idea that like, well, they're not going to accept the offer. Well, they might not accept. Well, first of all, you don't know that, right? Because they might, because you don't know. Like it could be an asset like the one, like this hotel I bought where they didn't get any offers for a whole year, despite, cutting the price over and over and over again. You don't know where their mind is or what has actually come through. But the second thing is if it's like a call for offer situation and you're not the top offer, you still may wind up getting the deal because the person who put in the high, the best offer may not be able to close.
Exactly. You got to run them out. That's all. Just run out the ground balls. I mean, if these are real solid things that you're interested in and you want to get into this business, you have to do that part. This is the most important part. All the other stuff is yes, there's a place for it, but the initial offer, you'll never get a deal if you don't make the offer, right?
Yeah,
so they're never going to come land on your desk.
The answer is absolutely 100% no if you don't make the offer.
Yeah.
So, like the only way you can guarantee yourself a result is by not doing, you can guarantee a no by not putting in the offer at all.
Exactly. Well, it's that's so interesting because, and I'm glad you mentioned that about the hotel and then, or the motel and purchasing that. We would never have talked about it. And especially since it's in, my backyard, in your backyard, right? Not too far. And I love the Finger Lakes. I mean, this summer Finger Lakes time is something very special. Let me ask you this question, because I've been thinking about this a lot. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like my, I don't know how much it makes sense, but it's something I feel deep inside me where it's everybody moved away from Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, right? A lot of people, it's certainly had its tough times. But we have something that Arizona doesn't have. A lot of big, growing cities don't have, which is fresh water. Do you see where that is going to play into people migrating back into upstate? Or is that, Marty, maybe in, 2080, that might be something that would be anything?
It's funny, but I do, but I don't know like how quickly it's going to happen. But I do think that, water is increasingly going to be an issue. And, New York not only has a lot of water. I mean, it's got two Great Lakes plus, Finger Lakes, Lake Champlain. I mean, there's a lot of fresh water in New York State. New York also has hydropower, right? Which a lot of people forget about. I mean, Niagara Falls generates a ton of electricity, and it is not subject to the price of oil. It is not subject to,
great point,
to like some country cutting off our oil or our gas. I mean, it is completely and utterly not dependent on that. And so you're actually starting to see some companies starting to think about New York more seriously, precisely because of fresh water and power, right? And I think, New York has a really bad reputation in terms of being business unfriendly. But I think the reality on the ground is that things have been changing sort of quietly beneath the surface, and it hasn't really reached a critical mass yet where people are aware of it. But I just the other day met with an economic development person for the Finger Lakes region, and she was telling me like a lot of the stuff that's going on in terms of businesses relocating to New York. And she didn't have to sell me because we already made the investment, right?
Sure.
like she was trying to sell me on kind of applying for certain tax benefits and stuff. But just in terms of like the kinds of manufacturing that had been moving back into New York, I was actually kind of surprised because I didn't know about it. And I was like, why is this not more publicized? But and she said, the thing about New York is sort of like the top line is bad, but there are so many incentive programs that by the time you kind of like work through all the incentive programs, you can wind up with a pretty good deal tax wise. I just wish they would just make it simpler from the get-go, right? Like that would be better than to have to make you jump through all these hoops to get the tax benefits. Just like make the whole thing more streamlined and simple would be preferable, but maybe we'll get there. I think maybe we'll get there.
It's someone's job though, Johnathan, to make it complicated. They have to have that there so that they can say why they should get their income in probably a very nice government retirement and everything else. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I really like your philosophy on C-class properties. You spoke on actually a friend of mine, Bo Eckstein's show. And you talked about the C class being a bit more, or people maybe have the thought that a C class is a kind of more recession proof property type. And your explanation on it was very fascinating. Can you go into that a little bit about how, that's actually maybe the most impacted?
So, yeah, I mean, listen, there's, I don't know where this idea came from, but where it started, but it's a pretty like common thing to hear in the business, especially in like the sort of guru landscape.
Yeah.
That like C-class properties are the best place to be in a recession. And it's because of some very simplistic reasoning, which is that C-class rents are cheaper. In a recession, people are worried about money. So then they're going to go rent in a C property instead. Sounds really plausible, right? Like people want to save money, they're going to go rent in a C property.
Yes.
And therefore, C properties are really recession proof. The problem with this idea is that it's not supported by any evidence at all. In fact,
that's the only problem.
That's the only problem. Like in fact, the evidence is the other way around. And you'll hear this like when you start talking with more seasoned multifamily investors. What you find is that a lot of people start off in C because it's, the returns look better on paper. It looks really good. It's also in some sense sort of easier to get your hands on these assets because you're not competing with quite as many people for them. And, like a lot of people, that's sort of the way they get into the market. What happens is once they operate a few of these C properties, they realize, gosh, they look good on paper, but in reality, they're tough to run, and the returns are not there the way that you expect, unless you just like rehab and exit, right, and hand the problem to somebody else. But what you find is these C properties, you're dealing with the population of people in the United States that doesn't, they're even in good times, right? They don't have a lot of like excess money on hand to just help them get through life, right? So when they have any kind of trouble in their personal life, the rent doesn't get paid, right? And there's no one, you can't collect it because the money isn't there. It's not like they're just gaming the system. Like the money ain't there, right? So you wind up with a lot of collections problems. You wind up, with a lot of delinquency, and then the properties are older. So on top of that, like you're fighting this rent collection problem at the same time that you've got stuff going wrong on the property that you got to fix, right? And so it's kind of like the worst of both worlds. So what you find is that a lot of people go through this evolution where they start out with C's, and then they may go through like sort of the rehab. And there are people who just love the rehab business and that's all they want to do, and they just want to cycle through it, 18 months to 2 years and just do that. But the people who want to be like longer term owners, they eventually come to the realization that, yeah, a B property is going to cost you more at the get-go, but the returns wind up being pretty much the same when you factor in all that other stuff, like the collections issues and, the additional CapEx. So a lot of people just wind up going to B. Now, that's the general reason why people go to B. But then you want to add in this recession piece to it, which is that, so you're taking this population of people who are already vulnerable, right? Already kind of stretched to pay their rent just because of basic affordability issues, right? And when you have a recession, those are precisely the people whose jobs get cut first,
Yes.
right? And so they're, what you're talking about is sort of the low-level white-collar workers, blue-collar workers, retail workers. They're when the corporations are making a decision about like who they need to cut costs, they're not cutting, Marty, who's got all the institutional knowledge and knows how to run the business. Yeah, maybe he's making more money, but if they fire him, it means that they can't ramp up again when the economy comes back. So who they fire, they let go all those people who have skills that are very easily replaced. And that's your C-class renter. So if you just look at like the recession, the pattern of unemployment in recessions, let's say your headline unemployment in a recession is 7%. For your C-class renter, it's going to be like 10, 12%.
Right.
And for your B-class renter, it might be like 3 or 4%. Right. So those renters are going to get hit harder. And if you're saying like, well, hey, the B-class renters are going to come and make up the difference. Well, first of all, the C-class renters who are not paying your rent, they may not necessarily be gone. They may still be in the apartments, just not paying you any rent. And you've got several months of time just to try to get rid of them. Right. Then on top of it, if you think about so the B-class renters have more cushion, right? So they're not going to lose their jobs, but if they do, they've probably got enough cushion for them to then pay their rent while they're looking for a new job. And they will find, even in a recession, they will eventually find a new job, right? But they have the cushion to tide them over, so they will continue to pay their rent. They're not going to say like, oh, hey, I like my nice B class or B plus, community in the neighborhood I like, with the schools that I like, near my job, whatever. And I'm going to go move down, a couple miles away to this kind of like rundown sort of property just because it's cheaper. Like nobody's thinking that, right?
Correct.
Even if they're, and then you think about, well, sort of in the universe of people who might think that, well, their lease has to expire just at that right time, right? For them to then decide to go find that other apartment. So the whole idea that C-class is somehow insulated just because the rents are cheaper just doesn't actually bear up to scrutiny. And if you look at the statistics, if you look at like the stats that like the Census Bureau puts out and stuff, you can actually see that vacancies go up. And then just sort of the anecdotal stuff. And I remember a few years ago when this is before any recession started, but when everybody was like talking about the possibility of there being a recession, like 2018, 2019, I remember going to like my property manager, and this is a guy who's been in the business for 40 years. He was like the president of the National Apartment Association, like really, really knows this business. And I said, hey, Mike, I just want to have a reality check with you because I keep on hearing this and it doesn't make sense to me, but I want your take on it. And I said, do C-class properties perform better in recessions because they're cheaper? And he just laughed. Yeah. It's just like, he's like, no, why does anybody say that? You don't hear any property managers saying that. The only people you hear saying that are like people who are either selling you a course or trying to tell you why you should be investing in their C-class deal. And people who are like operating C-class properties are not telling you like, hey, my experience has been that C-class properties are better in a recession than the other ones. So anyway, that was really long-winded, but that's
it's important. And it's really important you mention it and go into it and give us the facts, because it's super tough, I think, for new people when they see those, like you said, the numbers on the page. They'll scream at you saying how good this investment will be. So, you unfortunately, I did have to learn the hard way with that, because of course everyone tells you not to do that, or they may not say that. They'll say, you want to buy in an area that you would like to live in or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And it really comes back to the just general rule. The golden rule is price is what you pay and value is what you're going to get. And it's so true with that type of property. And especially with the turnover, where year over year, you are going to have to just absolutely know, no ifs, ands, or buts, that if you did turnover and then they leave in 12 months, you're doing the exact same turnover work again. It's not like it's being left in an appropriate way a lot of times, unfortunately.
Yeah, you just have more issues, right? With
Right.
you have the turns are harder. I think you have just like you're not going to get like in an A-class property where you're renting to like some lawyers and some accountants and people like that.
Right.
You're not going to get stuff like people getting rid of a baby diaper by trying to flush it down the toilet. Right. Like you just don't get that kind of stuff.
You
and
don't.
like people disposing of their garbage by flushing it down the toilet. Right.
Yeah.
It's just, but you get in a C-class property, you just get that stuff constantly. Right. So there's just that sort of thing to deal with.
Yeah, you want to own property where people want to live there and not have to live there, right? That's kind of like the main point of it. I have a couple questions for you because you've been in this business for a long time, so I really want to hear some of these other things being answered. So, for new people that when they get started, a lot of times they're going to go to these meetups, they'll go to events, they'll go to these masterminds. Are there strategies that you found that work really well? As like for someone who's new, there's not a lot of confidence when you're entering that room. Yeah, maybe if you've done a couple single families, but you're going into rooms with people who just they feel like they belong and you may not feel like you belong. So is there like a strategy that you can think of like, hey, this worked really well for me? Was it maybe just being the one that went up to people and introduced themselves? I mean, it can be very tough though. And I don't know if there's a way that you've done it or seen that people, hey, this has been successful. This is a great way for people to connect. I guess what do you do in those types of situations?
Well, I would say a couple of things. The first thing that's really important is for people to understand that it's just natural to feel uncomfortable early on, right? Like this is the way. It's not fun, but this is the way you're supposed to feel, right? Like if you didn't feel that way, that there'd be something wrong with you.
That's so good.
Or you're just like you have some kind of super special social skill where you just don't feel that way, and then you're one of the lucky few. But for the rest of us mere mortals, you're going to walk into that room and you're going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to feel like an imposter, and you're going to be worried that like somebody's going to ask you the question of like, how many deals have you done?
Right.
And you're going to not, and then like you imagine that like you're going to say, I own one, short-term rental, and they're going to laugh at you and walk away. Right. Like it's natural to worry about that. The second thing to remember is that that's not going to happen. Like none of that's going to happen. Nobody's going to laugh at you. Like nobody's going to think badly of you for not being as experienced as they are, because that's all it is. They're just more experienced than you are. And they also started where you started. So I think it's important to keep that stuff in mind. The second sort of strategy is just keep on going until you feel comfortable, right? The more you go,
so good.
The more you go, the more comfortable you're going to feel as you get to know people, as you get to understand the lingo more, as you feel a little more like in control of like your knowledge grows, and you just, like it's like any other situation, you'll get more comfortable as you go. And then I think the third thing that you should keep in mind is I think a lot of people go into networking situations with the idea that they're supposed to get something out of the meeting. Like they're supposed to get a business card, or they're supposed to get a partner, they're supposed to get an investor, they're supposed to get a certain number of contacts. And if you go into a networking meeting with that kind of attitude, like you're going to be the guy that like, while you're talking to me, you're looking over my shoulder to see who else is around. And like, that's going to make me think like, oh, this guy's a jerk. I don't want to talk to him anymore.
Yeah,
right?
Those are the worst.
And so like you want to go into these situations thinking about what you can offer people. And I'm not just talking about like the, like the typical stuff like, oh, I can bird dog for you, or, oh, I can raise money for you, or like, who cares really? Who cares? I think about it on a more human level, right? How can you help the person you're talking to? What is it that they're interested in? I remember I had a really eye-opening moment years ago when I first kind of got a little more serious about networking, where I went to a networking meeting. It wasn't about real estate. It was just a general kind of business networking meeting. And I was thinking like, man, I don't really have anything to offer. What, who's going to want to listen to me? And that particular meeting had what's called sort of structured networkings, where we actually went around the table and everybody did like 30 seconds on who they are, and then like something they can offer the group. Could be anything, right? And I literally didn't know what to say. So I said, I lived in Japan for a long time, and I know all the best Japanese restaurants in the city. So if you like Japanese food, talk to me. That's what I said in this business. And like 5 people came up to me afterwards, and they were like, "Oh, I want to know what your Japanese restaurant recommendations are." Right?
That's awesome.
Right? And so that's the kind of thing that you can easily do. Everybody has that. You might not know, one word about real estate investing, but you know something about lots of stuff, right? And you have skills, and you have network, you have contacts, and people want to connect on a human level. They don't, everybody there that can talk about real estate. And it's really boring, actually. Like go and like just try to make a human connection with people. Right?
So good. That's so good you said that, because I think a lot of people try to get lost. They do get lost in that, the whole shuffle of it all. And definitely, if you're listening to this and you're looking at events or meetups as something that's like you're supposed to get or transactional, that's how you're going to fail. Like if you're just trying to go around and around the room and give your business card to everybody, it looks, I don't know, maybe it's just my opinion, but it can be a little cheesy almost. It's like, make one really good connection instead of 50 like crappy, like just fake connections. One really good connection, and it will pay for itself by doing that.
But listen, and if you want, I'll tell you like my real networking secret though, if you want to know it. Like
yes.
You could put this on like the paid version of your podcast, right?
That's it.
The premium content.
Yeah, okay. The Patreon.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the real like the real key though to networking, for the purposes of building a business in real estate, is to don't go to someone else's meetup, make your own meetup.
Oh, for sure.
Be the leader, right? Be the leader of the meetup. And you don't need, the thing I think a lot of people think is like, oh, if I do a meetup, I've got to provide content or whatever. Like, yeah, you should provide a little bit of content once in a while yourself, but you should just also invite other people in who can provide the content, and you just be the face of the meetup. And if you do that consistently, like that just instantly elevates you. Everybody knows who you are, right? You don't have to go and like network with everybody and introduce yourself to everybody and go and have a bunch of one-on-one conversations. Everybody wants to talk to you because you're the person who organized the meetup, right? So that's the thing. And then my other sort of networking secret is like, well, this probably is better when you get a little bit further along in your business, but once you kind of develop some expertise in the business, don't go to the real estate meetups. Go to all the other meetups and be the only real estate person in the room, right? Go find like the events where it's like a college alumni event or the Chamber of Commerce event, or like name it. I mean, the country, something at the country club, or any place that there's going to be people with money there who might be interested in real estate. Go and be the only real estate guy there. And just talk to them about what you do. Hey, I do real estate. I help people invest in real estate. Like, guarantee you, those people are going to be interested in what you have to say, and you're not competing with like 50 other people just like you in the same room who are trying to do the same thing. And, that's what I always tell my students. Like, go find those rooms where you can be the only real estate person in the room.
That is incredible. That's worth it right there. I mean, that's so good. I have wrestled with joining like different organizations because it's time, right? I'm doing my meetup. I have one, and we, the Upstate New York Real Estate Investor Group, and we do a meetup monthly. I'm doing videos. I do the podcast, and I'm trying to really give as much as possible. But I think you just basically said, well, suck it up, join another group or join another 2 groups. And doesn't mean you have to go every single freaking event, just one a quarter. Whatever it might be, and let people know what you do, because I agree with you. I think that's absolutely true, that try to be the person, or be the person in the room, that there isn't another real estate investor or a large multifamily or a large commercial investor. Because you say that, though, when you tell people that is what you do, it's so interesting to them, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's incredible.
Because in real estate, the great thing about real estate is like everybody understands it, right? And everybody wants to be involved in it. And so when you've got people who have some investable funds, they're the reason that they haven't invested in real estate is because they think it takes too much work. And it does if you do it yourself, but if you can offer them the opportunity to do all the work and they just invest like a stock, they really like that. And I don't know if you know who Brian Briscoe is.
Yes.
Brian. So Brian posted on his LinkedIn page the other day something that, like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, it's like one of those things like, yeah, I know this, but I keep on forgetting to talk about it. And what it was that he was at some kind of event and he met somebody and told him what he does, which is, he's a syndicator, and that he makes it possible for people to invest in multifamily passively. And the guy said, wow, I've never heard of that before. That's amazing. Right. And like, what you forget is that most of the people in the world have never heard of syndications before.
Correct.
Right. And those are the people you want to be talking to, because if you're like in this world where we're talking on each other's podcasts and we're going to the same events and the same conferences and we're in the same Facebook groups, and it seems like everybody knows what syndication is about, and we're kind of all competing for those same people. But the reality of the situation is most people have no idea. Most people who are qualified to be in these investments have never even heard of this before. And you got to go find those people because they're just dying to know about this, right? So Brian was like just so spot on with that, with that post, right? So go find yourself some territory that you can own where you're the only guy doing this, and believe me, like those people are going to tell their friends too. So that's just really key to all of this.
You just gave probably one of the best nuggets, because remember, this is the Marty Grizzanti Show. There's a lot of people listening. You got a lot of value. You're getting a lot of value from Johnathan, and maybe a dash and sprinkle for me. But the biggest key point for me was, and maybe this is something we talk about off air, but it's going on, because my goal for 2023 is I want to be on I wrote it down somewhere. I think it's like 30 other people's podcasts. Right. Something like that. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be one of another real estate guy and another real estate guy's show. There's definitely value there. No doubt.
You should. I mean, definitely you should do this for sure.
Yeah.
It is a good thing to do.
That is for sure. But where I was getting at was, would it make sense too then to go on something that's completely different? Like, I'm just throwing it out there, like a home build, or no, let's just say a dentist podcast, and I'm the real estate strategy guy.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Like, is there a lot of those? Like, hey, I wanted to reach out because I don't know if you guys have ever had on a person that talks about, because hey, I have a few dentists that are a part of my deals on it, and that might get the wheels turning on other things. Or hey, look,
you just gave me a great idea.
Okay,
so thank you for that. Like,
that's
because I think that is a really, first of all, like, if all these professional groups, right, they're all interested in stuff like in investing, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they're any kind of like higher level employee or business owner, someone with a high income that needs investment opportunities. And if there are podcasts about those things, you know how it is to be a podcaster. Like, you start running out of things to talk about after a while. Yeah. You want to give some people something new. So to say to them, like, hey, this week we're deviating from how you fill a molar or whatever it is that they talk about, or like, how you run your practice, or that's, they might be talking about the business of being a dentist, right? That might be interesting. So like, part of the business of being a dentist is like, what do you do with the money that you make?
Exactly.
Right? And so I think there is opportunity there. I think there's opportunity in going on like the general kind of money and wealth shows, right?
Yes.
There's just being creative. I had a coach years ago, this guy named Todd Herman, as a member of his program. And one of the things that he always used to talk about, and he's not a real estate guy, he's just sort of general business guy. One of the things that Todd used to talk about all the time, and it sort of relates to what I was talking about before. He said, like, one of the best ways to develop business is to join other people's programs, like other paid groups. And I didn't really get it at the time, like get what he was talking about. But what I now understand what he was talking about was this idea of like, the paid groups are good because it's a self-selected audience of people who are really serious and they're willing to put money up, right? And so you already know that they're the type of people who like invest in themselves. And if it's a topic that's not real estate, then again, like, you're the only real estate person in the room.
So good.
Right. And you're basically in this group of, like, imagine this, you're like in a group of, like, say, online entrepreneurs, right? Who are all like, how do we make money, right, in online business? And then there's going to always be like the higher level group of the people who are really successful, who are like looking to get even more successful. Like, if you can get into some of those groups and be like, okay, hey guys, I don't really care about online business that much, but I really care about like what you're going to do with all the money you make. I'm here to help you with that piece of the puzzle, right? You'll be the only person there because they're all like selling their Amazon stuff or whatever it is. And like, nobody's there like talking about like, what do you do with the money that you make?
So
right?
good. So good. That's the nugget. And that's what we tried to find. And actually there was actually a lot of nuggets in this one. Johnathan, I want to be cognizant of your time. So I have a couple of questions. It's a speed round. But this has been really good. And it's also really nice to meet you, first of all.
You too. Yeah.
And
I'm happy to meet other New York investors too.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I don't get to talk to many, so it's really nice. I thought we were all gone, but we're here. We're here and we're killing it. Okay. If there's a metric that you track in your business, maybe it's, well, I'm asking you, what is the one metric you track in your business? Maybe you look at it daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. What would you choose?
Oh man, I have to own up to the fact that I'm like really terrible at stuff like this. So
so am I. That's why I ask.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, this is one of those things. I guess there's like different personality types. I'm sort of more like the visionary, and less of like the integrator type. If you're familiar with the traction model. So I have to confess, I'm not really like the tracker. If you're interested in talking about like habits I've tried to develop, I can talk about that. But I just try to be really, really good about sitting down every week and planning my week, and sitting down every day and planning my day, and then kind of reviewing what I did and what I got done, just so that I have like I try to keep everything in one planner, right? So like every random thought I used to be the kind of person that had like, oh, I got a thought and I'd write it down in a notebook, and then next thought would be in a different notebook. And sometimes I try to like have like different notebooks for different types of thought. And like, and it wound up with like, I could never find anything. I'd forget about stuff. The good ideas I had would disappear someplace. Now I make it a point to keep it all in my planner, right? Every random thought goes in the same place. So if I lose it, I'm screwed. But I mean, it's never happened to me, thankfully, but it's all there. And then I can just go back and find it. And so it becomes part of the review, like even the long-term goals and just the random ideas that I have become part of the stuff that I'm reviewing on a weekly basis, and just helps it keep in my mind. And I find that when you write stuff down and then when you review it, even if you don't consciously like say, okay, this week I'm going to do this, it's kind of weird how these things start to get done. And I'll just give you an example of this. Like long before I became a multifamily investor, I wrote down a goal of becoming a multifamily investor in a journal I kept in like a New Year's resolution. And then I lost that notebook. And I remember when I actually wrote that down, I was literally thinking, this is never going to happen. I will never be able to accomplish this. I'm stupid to be writing this down. And then 5 years later, when I had become a full-time multifamily investor, I stumbled onto this notebook and I'd completely forgotten that I'd written this down. And I was like, what's this? And I opened it up and I looked in this like front cover of this notebook where I had written out like my goals, and I had accomplished like most of them. and including become a full-time multifamily investor.
So cool.
And I had totally forgotten about any of these things, right? Or that I'd ever written them down. So writing them down is extremely powerful. And when you review them, it's even more powerful. So
that's maybe one of the best KPIs that we've got on the show, because I totally agree. And to steelman your point is that when you go and plan, because I like doing this on Sunday, I plan for Monday or at least my week. But I'm also a big believer in just having my calendar, even little things, put it in my calendar just to remember. But then you can go back the week, but like, so when on Sunday, I'll go back the previous week and I'll go through like my wins, my challenges, and anyway, and a couple other things. And then it helps me remember, oh shoot, I got to make sure I recontact that guy. Like it's in my calendar and I'm like, oh geez, I would have completely forgot about that appointment or forgot about that follow-up and to put it in my system. So I 100% agree with you. I think that's fantastic. Okay. What's a book that you recommend, or what's the most recent book that you read business-wise or real estate that you would suggest, or even like a book for maybe newer investors that was like a no-brainer that people need to read? Or maybe even a podcast that you've listened to recently that you really enjoyed, or even a YouTube channel.
So, I whenever I'm asked this question, I always kind of go back to the same book, which is it's not really a real estate book, but I just find it so helpful and I'm kind of due for a reread. It is called The War of Art, right? It's a play on the art of war.
So good. So good.
Yeah. The War of Art is a book by Stephen Pressfield. It's a little short book. It's like 150 pages long, and not every page is actually full. And you can read it in like 2 hours tops. But this book is about what it means to be successful as an artist. And in his case, he was a writer, but he talks up front in the book about how this is applicable to entrepreneurs too, which it absolutely is. And the War of Art, basically the central message of the War of Art is just do the work, right? Like it's going to be hard. You're going to feel like not doing it all the time. And you just have to get up in the morning and do it. And I mean, obviously there's a lot more to the book than that. It's a really great book. And he wrote another book called, which I forget the title of, which is also great, but it's a follow on to that. But it's just like, it might be even called Do the Work or something, but it's just great. I really recommend this book. If you're, I think every entrepreneur should read it, and you should especially read it if you're like someone like me, who's like more of the visionary and has trouble getting down to like, I'm great. I can come up with every idea in the world, but it's like hard for me to implement them sometimes because that's not the fun part. The fun part is coming up with the ideas, but this is all about like, okay, but the ideas are useless if you don't actually make them into a reality by just sitting down doing the work. So it's a great book.
I completely agree. And for anyone listening, I would also get the audio version because he does it. I believe Stephen Pressfield does it, and it's just coming from his voice. It's super powerful. So I totally agree with that. And my last question is, well, there's two. Do you spend yearly on personal development? Is that something that you do? Is that something that you believe in? And do you have like a budget for that, like in your personal?
I don't have a budget for it. It is something that I do. I mean, I don't do it every year. I do it sort of when I come across something that I think is really going to be helpful, or that I just is compelling for some reason. But absolutely, I've spent like thousands and thousands of dollars on coaching over the course of my life. So it's something that, and frankly, when we were talking before about getting into sort of some of those higher level, more expensive groups, the only sort of really expensive one I ever joined was Todd Herman's I talked about before. I can't tell you like how many people I use in my business today that I met through that program. So not so much like I feel like, oh, I made a ton of money but like I've hired like marketing people. I've hired my web designer. Like I've hired like all these people from that community because it was a self-selecting group of talented people. And so it's that I can't calculate what the return on that was, but I know that there was a great return on it. So I definitely am in favor of spending money.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And really it's, Michael Blanc, I went to one of his events and For those who know, apartment syndicator, and very well known. But he was like, the people here, this is the bonus. This is the bonus. And I remember him saying that. And I was like, and then later on I go, no, that is it. That's the most important part. All the other stuff, it leaves your brain literally, a couple days after. But the people there, you'll always remember, and you'll always be able to have those connections. And, and it's really the people that when you join a mastermind, the community is the difference maker. Every mastermind I've joined, I've leveled up my business because of somebody in the community, not the actual teacher.
Yeah, and it's oftentimes like something like, when you say it's the people, it's because you're going to be having a casual conversation with somebody there, and they're going to mention in an offhand way something that they do, and you're going to be like, "How? Yeah, why am I not doing this?" Right?
100%.
And it's not because somebody on the stage said like, "Oh, this is the 10 steps you have to take to be a successful multifamily investor." It's because of like somebody saying something like, it could be really simple. Like I had one of these the other day. It was because of my podcast. But again, like I met him at Michael Blank's actually. It's George Abreu. And I interviewed him, and I was asking him like how he developed his list of investors. And he said something which was like so freaking obvious, but I just never heard. It's like, whenever I go to an event and I collect business cards to give into my VA and have them input them all into my CRM system, and then they're on my list. And I was like,
so good.
Yeah, why am I not doing that? So now I do that. Like now, and I used to have like these stacks of business cards. Like,
right.
What am I doing with these things?
Right.
I don't have the time to sit there and put them all into my contacts and whatnot. So now I scan them all to my VA, and she does it. And it's like, it's over. It's easy and it's done. And you don't lose all those great contacts. And,
it's another really, really great tip, and it's something that I don't do and I will do. So that's really, really good. Last question for you, Johnathan. If you lost it all today, now, what would you do? And someone previously said, a commercial investor was like, I'd get my broker's license. He goes, that's what I would do. Mm-hmm. But anyways, thoughts on that?
If I lost it all today, what would I do?
And maybe you'd be like, well, I'd probably just go into, I'd go into, teaching. I'd go into blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I don't know if you have anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, just like anything in the world, I don't know. I mean, broker is not a bad idea, actually. I mean, I think I have a broker's license already, which I don't really use, but I think if I did have to, like, if somebody said like, okay, your business is kaput,
yeah,
got to go and like do something new. I think actually commercial brokerage would be something that would be interesting to me, and
I'm the same way.
I could pick it up, fast because of my experience. So
I'm the same way. Well, that is the show for today, Johnathan. Thank you so much for coming on here. I know that there's a couple places that people can find you. I know that you have the multifamily launchpad. Can you explain that a little bit, or where people can also reach out to you?
Yeah, actually, so multifamily launchpad, we literally this week, we've kind of completed our rebranding of that program. So it's now called Apartment Investors Club. Okay. So you can go to apartmentinvestorsclub.com. There's a free download there that you can grab. It's called the Ultimate Checklist to how to do your first 100-unit deal with other people's money and get paid to do it.
Love
that. That is a free download that you've got. You can also join my community on Facebook, which is also the Apartment Investors Club. And if you're interested in investing with me, just Google Two Bridges Asset Management, and I'll come right up, and you can fill out the investor form on the page there.
Excellent. I learned a lot, and I got a lot of good nuggets from this that are going to really help my business. And just, brainstorming with you was also a very, very helpful. And I just thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. It was really, really nice meeting you.
Absolutely. It was really fun. It was great meeting you, and looking forward to getting to know you better upstate. Absolutely.
Well, that's the show, boys and girls. Thanks again to Johnathan for coming on to the show, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Marty Grizzanti Show. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, leave us an honest rating and review. If you're on Spotify, make sure you follow us for weekly episodes.